Welcome to this week's edition of Baseball Weekend Journal. I'm your host, Paul Shivari. This week, I continue to keep my eyes on the hot stove as big-time free agents still await their next destinations. Winter leagues in Australia and the Caribbean wrap up. And I give my picks for the top prospects to watch for this year in the American League. All that and more on the Baseball Weekend Journal for the week of February 7th, 2016. The Arizona Diamondbacks continue to make big moves as they traded away more prospects and second baseman Aaron Hill in return for a Major League-ready infielder. Jean Segura, formerly of the Milwaukee Brewers, was traded to Arizona in a 5-player deal that saw minor leaguers Chase Anderson and Isan Diaz shipped to Milwaukee with Hill. Diaz, who is only 19, is a favorite of many executives around the league, but will be competing against Brewers' top prospect Orlando Arcia, who is projected to start his season in AAA. Perhaps Diaz will be a key trade piece for the Brewers, as they are more than likely in the midst of a giant rebuild to keep up with a tough NL Central division. Segura, who played shortstop in Milwaukee, will possibly be moved over to second base to fill the gap left open by Hill's departure. The Diamondbacks have made bold moves this offseason by signing pitcher Zach Greinke and trading for pitcher Shelby Miller in a deal that saw the departures of their top prospects Dansby Swanson and Aaron Blair. I'll let you know in the next month if I think these moves were worthy enough to make the D-backs contenders in 2016 and beyond. With pitchers and catchers reporting to their camps in just 2 weeks, many solid Major League-ready pitchers remain unsigned. Tyler Clippard, who spent last season with the Oakland Athletics before being traded to the New York Mets in time for their pennant run, is getting looks from the Arizona Diamondbacks and Tampa Bay Rays. The Rays traded Jake McGee to the Colorado Rockies last week and Kevin Jepsen to the Minnesota Twins, which now creates a need in Tampa Bay for a setup man for Brad Boxberger. Yovani Gallardo, who started for Texas in 2015, continues to be unsigned but may find a home with the Baltimore Orioles before long. The downside to bringing on Gallardo for the Orioles is his declining velocity and strikeout rate and the forfeiture of the 14th overall draft pick. The Orioles have not drafted higher than 22nd since they picked up Kevin Gausman with the 4th overall pick in 2012. Gallardo, as well as infielder Ian Desmond and outfielder Dexter Fowler, are the only remaining free agents who have accepted their qualifying offers. Any team that signs them will have to forfeit a draft pick, which makes signing these players costly. Sacrificing development of future talent to win now has always been a philosophical conundrum for Major League teams. This is why some teams are willing to trade prospects for Major League level talent at the risk of losing a great player that is more than a year or two away from making their big league debut, while some teams choose to pad their farm system with talented players, keeping the big league club stocked through piecemeal movement. Teams that do not want to sign Gallardo because of the lost draft pick are looking towards Matt Latos, Tim Lincecum, and Jeremy Guthrie as possible alternatives. Lincecum, the National League Cy Young Award winner in 2008 and 2009, threw a no-hitter in 2014 and 2013. He is coming off of season-ending hip surgery, and his agent, Rick Thurman, has stated that Lincecum has no instability in his hip and that Lincecum is excited about his progress. Tim Lincecum, though a risky option, could be a valuable pickup for teams looking for back-of-the-rotation or middle relief options. The list of remaining free agents that can compete at the Major League level seems unusually high in my opinion. With only a few weeks to go until spring training starts, position players like the ones previously mentioned, like Desmond and Fowler, along with Pedro Alvarez, Alex Rios, and David Freese, still remain without a home for 2016. Whether this is part of a youth movement or a buyer's market remains to be seen, but I would have to guess that the players I've mentioned will finalize their 2016 plans before March 1st. I'll keep you updated on where they end up as the weeks roll by leading up to opening day on April 3rd and 4th. The Australian League Championship Series opened on Friday in Brisbane, Queensland, Australia, between the Brisbane Bandits and the Adelaide Bite. In Game 1, the Bandits took the lead in the first inning on Braylon Jackson's solo home run. The Bite tied it up in the second when Stephen Welch doubled in Mariners prospect Kyle Petty. Brisbane took control of the game, getting to Bite starting pitcher Josh Tolles and scoring 4 in the home half of the third. A 3-run homer from Bite left fielder Angus Roger put Adelaide down by 1 run at the halfway point of the game. Insurance runs in the 6th and 8th innings gave way to the Bandits closer Ryan Searle, who set the league's single-season saves record with 17 this year. Searle struck out the side to finish Game 1 in a 7-4 victory for Brisbane. The Bandits went to Travis Blackley to start Game 2 in their best hopes of winning their first Claxton Shield. Blackley turned in a 6-inning performance, giving up only 1 run and striking out 6. Countering Blackley was Bite pitcher Stephen Chambers, who despite being dominant during the season, struggled in his final start of the regular season. Chambers didn't fare any better on Saturday in Queensland as he gave up 4 runs in 4+ innings of work, including a 3-run home run to Bandits first baseman Donald Lutz. Lutz's home run in the 3rd inning was the first score of the game, and the Bandits never looked back on their way to their first championship, winning the 80-plus-year-old trophy, the Claxton Shield. Lutz won the MVP award, going 3 for 7 with 1 home run and 4 RBIs in the 2-game series. This week, the champions from Central and South American leagues met in the Dominican Republic to compete in the annual Caribbean Series. Teams from Mexico, the Dominican, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Venezuela played in a round-robin format Monday through Friday and narrowed down to the Final 4, with the semifinals being played on Saturday. The championship game is on Sunday. The host team from the Dominican Republic was the lone team that did not advance to the semifinal, losing all 4 of their games, including the de facto deciding game against Cuba in an epic match that went 11 innings on Friday night. Cuba tied the game in the 8th inning and scored 2 runs in the top of the 11th to win 4-2. Saturday's matchup featured Puerto Rico taking on Venezuela in the early game and Cuba playing Mexico in the night game. The winners of the 2 games will play on Sunday. Ironically, Dominican teams have won the most championships in the history of the series, with 19 total of the 50-plus years of the series. Highlights of this week's series have included Venezuela's Felix Perez winning the first Caribbean Series home run derby in pitcher-friendly Estadio Quisqueya. Perez defeated former Major Leaguer Vladimir Guerrero amongst other contestants. The continued standout play of Cuban infielder Yulesky Gurriel has drawn interest from Major League teams despite being over 30 years old. Gurriel went 8 for 17 in 4 games in the tournament. And 39-year-old former MLB star Freddie Garcia set the tone for the Venezuelan team on Monday with a 6-inning, 1-run performance in the first game of the tournament. Next week, I'll recap the final games of the Caribbean Series. Last week, I promised you that I would talk about some of the top prospects for each team. My list isn't necessarily who is the top prospect for their team or who will make the biggest impact in 2016, but more of a who's who and who to look out for coming up in 2016. Most of these players either have made their debuts or are expected to this season. Some may just be a year away. This week, I'll give you the American League prospects. Starting off in the East, the New York Yankees first baseman Greg Bird exceeded his rookie limits in 2015 and will miss 2016 after surgery this week on his torn labrum. The Yankees' top prospects are now outfielder Aaron Judge and shortstop Jorge Mateo, who were invited to spring training and will more than likely not break camp with the Yankees, but should see time in the Bronx as the season progresses. Mateo could see time as a pinch runner for a Yankee team competing down the stretch for a division title and a playoff spot. While Cuban infielder Yoan Moncada is the top Boston Red Sox prospect, left-handed pitcher Brian Anderson will make the biggest impact for the Red Sox. Anderson made 1 start last year but failed to get through the 5th inning. The Tampa Bay Rays have always been known as a team that had to draft well and develop in order to compete in the big leagues as a small market team with a smaller payroll. This continues to be the case as they have many young stars that will make their debuts in years to come. As far as this year goes, left-handed pitcher Blake Snell seems to be the player that is capable of making the biggest impact for the Rays this year. The re-signing of Chris Davis put a damper on the immediate future of Baltimore Orioles up-and-coming slugger Christian Walker. Walker could see time as a call-up in September or before if the Orioles have injuries to Davis or Steve Pearce, or if Hanson is traded before the trade deadline as a key piece to bring in pitching or other help that the O's would need to address. Meanwhile, Dylan Bundy, who made his big league debut over 3 years ago, could get a shot to make the O's rotation or at least come out of the bullpen in 2016. The Toronto Blue Jays don't boast an array of minor league talent that is ready to take the next step to the show in 2016. With that being said, there is still always hope for some players to get their shot. Those players include Andy Burns, a defensive infielder who doesn't hit for power but can get on base and could fulfill a short-term need at second base while Devin Travis recovers from a shoulder injury. Another possibility for the Blue Jays is right-handed pitcher Joe Biagini, who needs to develop a breaking pitch but can mix speeds. His fastball tops out in the mid-90s. Biagini has pitched at the Double-A level and would only be called up to Toronto if there was a desperate situation in the Blue Jays bullpen. Heading over to the American League Central, the White Sox have a position player and a pitcher who top their lists. Tim Anderson, a shortstop drafted in 2013, has not played higher than Double-A and will need time in Triple-A before he takes over at the big league level. Unless the Sox find a better option than Tyler Saladino, Anderson could have a chance to get called up in 2016 to play shortstop. But pitcher Carson Fulmer could get his chance this year. It will be out of the bullpen, but there is always a chance that he gets a spot start. The Detroit Tigers' top prospect pitcher Michael Fulmer will probably not be making any appearances this season unless he is a September call-up or a spot starter in the summer. Their best bet for contribution comes from Jacoby Jones, who will be attending spring training but will miss 38 games due to his second drug violation. Jones still needs time to develop, but can hit with power and steal bases. For the defending champion Kansas City Royals, I'll take the easy road and say that Raul Mondesi, who made his Major League debut in the World Series, is your best bet to see some time this year. Plain and simple. With the Minnesota Twins, it would be easy to start and end the list with Byron Buxton, but he has already made his MLB debut, and despite past seasons with injuries, he should be ready to go this year. But the player that is rising up prospects lists is right-handed pitcher Jose Berrios. Berrios stands only 6 feet tall and weighs only 185 pounds, but will get his chance to compete with an invite to Twins spring training. Another pitcher to watch out for this season will be lefty Tyler Jay, who was selected at 6th overall last season as the closer for the University of Illinois. All eyes will be on former number 1 overall draft pick in 2014 Brady Aiken as he makes his professional debut in mid-May or June. But the Cleveland Indians' top prospect is Mike Clevenger, who could make the jump to the majors out of the Tribe's bullpen. Their top position player, who could see time in 2016, is outfielder Tyler Naquin, who needs to stay healthy to make the jump. Over in the AL West, the Oakland A's are another small market team that has to thrive off of savvy drafting. They boast some of the great prospects, but not many are slated to see action in 2016 in Oakland. Be on the lookout for catcher Jacob Nottingham, who has the type of bat that may force him to learn a new position. Otherwise, with the logjam at first base, Matt Olson will probably be staying in the minors this season, but could see a change of scenery if the A's stay active at the trade deadline, which they are known to do. The Houston Astros have had the luxury of selecting some of the top available talent in each draft after seasons of being bottom dwellers in the major leagues. Some of that talent is still developing at the minor league level and will not see action for some time. However, A.J. Reed, who excelled in 50 games at Double-A Corpus Christi, may see a jump to the majors if the Stros are in need of a bat. Fortunately for A.J. Reed, there's not too much standing in his way to playing first base for Houston, as he will have only Jonathan Singleton to compete with for the spot for now. The Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim have such a stacked lineup that they don't really need to use their farm system, but nonetheless, Chad Hinshaw could fight for a spot in left field if the Angels don't upgrade within the year. If they need pitching, they might turn to Victor Alcantara for a spot start. He isn't likely to see significant time in the bullpen as the Angels are grooming him as a starter for now. Texas Rangers third baseman Joey Gallo retained his rookie status after playing in 36 games last season. Gallo impressed many with his 6 home runs and 108 at-bats, but struck out more than half of those at-bats. He will need to get on base more for the Rangers if he wants to hit for power at a regular clip in the show. It will be some time before the Seattle Mariners call up Alex Jackson. They traded first baseman Patrick Kivlahan, so that leaves us with DJ Peterson. Peterson won't make too much of an impact and is likely a September call-up at this point. Their outfield may see the likes of Luis Liberato if the Mariners are willing to start his service time ahead of schedule. Next week, I'll give you the National League prospects as we inch closer to spring training. Tidbits before I close this week's show. The Tampa Bay Rays seem to be working on the knuckleball pitchers of the future. Converted catcher Jeff Howell signed this week on a minor league deal, joining Eddie Gamboa. Former Major League knuckleballer Charlie Hager was recently hired by the organization as an instructor. I'm a fan of the knuckleball and I wish these guys luck on their careers. NL Cy Young Award winner Jake Arrieta and the Cubs avoided arbitration when the two sides agreed on Friday to a 1-year deal worth $10.7 million. Arrieta will be up for arbitration next season unless the two sides can hammer out an extension. And finally, comedian Jerry Seinfeld tweeted out to Mets outfielder Yoenis Cespedes after the Cuban slugger was traded to the Mets last summer. Seinfeld invited Cespedes out for Cuban sandwiches. It never happened, but after Cespedes re-signed with the Mets the other week, Seinfeld congratulated Cespedes on staying with the club, and Cespedes tweeted back to Seinfeld that he would love to talk over Cuban sandwiches. So if you're in New York in a Cuban restaurant and you see the two dining together, now you know the backstory. That will do it for this week's edition of Baseball Weekend Journal. Make sure to find us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter @BaseballWeekend, and email the show with questions or comments, baseballwj@gmail.com. For Baseball Weekend Journal, I'm Paul Shivari, and I'll see you next weekend.